Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're diving headfirst, really, into a story that, well, it's almost unbelievable in some ways, but it's also deeply rooted in, our digital lives.
Absolutely.
You might cast your mind back maybe to 2015. It's almost a decade ago now, which is kind of wild to think about.
It really is.
But yeah, 2015, the infamous Ashley Madison hack just exploded
Well,
all over the headlines everywhere.
completely. A digital bombshell, as you said.
It really was. It exposed millions of users, shattered who knows how many relationships, and just, frankly, left everyone reeling. Just the sheer amount of really personal data that was suddenly out there.
Yeah, just exposed.
But it really makes you stop and think, doesn't it?
Yeah.
If that much sensitive information could be breached, in one go.
Yeah.
What else? What else was happening, maybe more quietly, in the darker corners of the internet back then?
Precisely. And that Ashley Madison incident, it wasn't just a tech breach, was it? It was more like a societal tremor. It absolutely pushed conversations about online privacy, about how fragile digital trust really is, and, the hidden complexities of relationships in this connected world, pushed them right to the forefront.
Right into the open.
It tore open that whole public discussion about anonymity online and showed really starkly the real-world consequences, often devastating consequences, when that anonymity just gets stripped away suddenly.
Yeah.
It was this huge reminder of how deeply our digital lives are tangled up with our personal lives. And, well, as this story shows, sometimes with our deepest, most guarded secrets.
And that's exactly the uncharted territory we want to explore today. Our mission here is to guide you beyond those big headlines,
Yeah.
into a story that's much more intricate, maybe more unsettling.
Definitely more unsettling, I'd say.
Our source material for this deep dive comes from excerpts from Ambivalent: Hacking, Cheating, and the Toll of Deception. And this isn't, some dry academic thing.
Not at all.
It's raw.
Yeah.
It's first person, unfiltered, and it gives this unique, sometimes frankly uncomfortable perspective.
It really does.
It's a look at that messy intersection of hacking, human relationships, and the surprising, often really crushing, personal toll it takes on the people involved.
The human cost.
Exactly. So we're going to unpack the journey of someone, they call themselves Dexter, who consciously chose to operate in this really morally gray area. We'll look at the methods they use, which are pretty unconventional,
Very.
and dive into the profound, often painful changes it caused in how they understood, well, human nature itself. It's a journey, from the digital trenches to this really personal reckoning. And it makes us ask some uncomfortable questions about ourselves, about trust in this digital world.
It absolutely does.
Okay, so let's start by grounding ourselves in that infamous Ashley Madison hack. Because in a weird way, it kind of acted as this bizarre spotlight on the exact kind of shadow world our source, Dexter, was already in.
Right. It sets the scene perfectly.
So this group, Anonymous, call themselves the Impact Team.
Hmm.
They hit Ashley Madison in July 2015. And when I say hit, I mean they executed this massive, devastating breach.
They didn't hold back.
Not at all. They didn't just scratch the surface. They got user account data for, wait for it, 37 million users.
37 million. It's just staggering.
Just try to wrap your head around that number. 37 million people.
Uh-huh.
Their logins, their personal emails, their entire payment history, passwords.
And it gets worse.
Oh, it gets way worse.
Yeah.
Their stated sexual fantasies, credit card info, real names, even home addresses.
Everything just laid bare.
It was this unprecedented invasion of privacy, just laying bare the deepest secrets of millions for anyone to see, really, or anyone who dared to look.
That's a really critical point. What's so striking about the Impact Team, their actions, is that they weren't just, stealing data for money or the usual reasons.
Right, it wasn't typical.
No, they made very specific demands. They threatened to dump all the customer records online unless Avid Life Media, that was the parent company,
Ashley Madison's parent, yeah.
unless they immediately shut down all of their websites. So this wasn't your standard ransomware thing or quietly selling data on the dark web.
No, it felt different.
It was overtly ideological, the kind of self-appointed demand for moral accountability. And the implications of that kind of public, deeply personal data breach that went way beyond the initial shock.
For sure.
It caused this huge upheaval for user privacy, obviously, but more broadly, it just decimated the public's already shaky trust in any online platform that promised discretion or anonymity.
Any platform, yeah. That promise was shattered.
It served as this stark global reminder that, in the digital world, trust is incredibly fragile. And when it's broken on that kind of scale, the fallout goes way beyond the immediate victims. It fundamentally changes how everyone sees and uses the internet.
Yeah.
It just reshaped what private even means anymore, you know, in our connected world.
Now, here's where Dexter's perspective gets really, really interesting. When this huge Ashley Madison story broke, Dexter's first reaction, almost detached, was hackers hacking a cheating site. Kind of lousy.
Lulzy, it's such a telling word choice, isn't it?
It really is. Almost flippant, dark irony.
Yeah, dripping with it.
And they were quick to say, look, we weren't involved in the Ashley Madison hack itself, but they deliberately use it as this jumping off point for their own story.
Right. A framing device.
Yeah, it frames the kind of shadowy world they were in, puts it in context.
It's fascinating because that comment, kind of lulzy, actually shows this deep, almost cynical grasp of the digital underworld, doesn't it?
It does.
And Dexter immediately pivots to the question, could it happen again? Contrary to what experts can tell you, one can never be too sure.
Billing.
And it's not just rhetorical, is it? It's this insight from someone who knows that underbelly. It's not just about website security flaws.
No, it's deeper.
It points to something more fundamental, a vulnerability in our digital lives.
Yeah.
The human element. You know, even with the best cybersecurity, if people are willing to be deceived or willing to deceive, the hack goes beyond code. It becomes psychological manipulation.
Yeah, exploiting people.
Exactly. And Dexter, having operated right in that gray area, they just knew intuitively that the real weak spot isn't always the software. It's often our desires, our secrets, the fragile nature of trust, especially online.
Makes sense.
So that statement immediately signals, look, Ashley Madison wasn't some one-off. It wasn't the only time cheaters and hackers mixed. Dexter's story is exactly about one of those less publicized, maybe even more morally murky intersections.
Right, where the lines just blur completely.
Totally blurred, where the digital world is manipulated not just for money, but for orchestrating really personal, often devastating outcomes. It shifts our focus from those big breaches we hear about to the more intimate, hidden acts of digital deception.
And that insight from Dexter leads us straight into the, well, frankly, surprising origins of how they got involved in what they call the deception business.
Yeah, the pivot is kind of jarring.
It really is. It wasn't like, oh, let's do something shady for fun or money. It was the opposite. It came from this deep, almost physical weariness.
Exhaustion.
Burnout, basically. Total burnout. Before December 2014, Dexter and their group, they were deep in this incredibly heavy, mentally draining work. Operations fighting some of the absolute worst stuff online.
Truly dark stuff.
Things like initiating DOS RPPedo sites, so denial of service attacks against child role play and pedophile sites, trying to knock them offline.
Yeah, taking them down.
They're also doing doxing and reporting cappers to NCME portal, so identifying and exposing people distributing child abuse material, and reporting them through the official channels, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children.
Which is crucial work.
Absolutely. And incredibly, they were also working on piecing together info related to horrific situations like the Amanda Todd case, that awful cyberbullying and suicide case.
Yeah, that was harrowing.
So this was really dark, emotionally draining, but, morally righteous work, fighting the worst of the internet.
It's vital, though, to really get the psychological toll Dexter describes from that period. They talk about dealing with images, content that mentally twists your perception of humanity.
I can only imagine.
Leading to this constant feeling of heaviness and how the whole group was starting to freeze mentally and emotionally, just becoming numb.
Wow.
And this is such a powerful but often totally unseen side of working in these intense cyber investigations, even when the cause is absolutely good.
Right, the cost to the investigators themselves.
Exactly. It highlights the profound emotional, psychological cost of just being constantly exposed to extreme human depravity. Not just seeing something awful once, but living in it.
Immersion.
Yeah, prolonged immersion.
Wow.
And it warps your understanding of humanity itself, leads to despair, or like Dexter said, just this numbing detachment. It's classic vicarious trauma. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, it just hammers home that even those fighting the good fight, these digital vigilantes or investigators, they're not immune. They get scarred too, deeply.
They clearly reached a breaking point.
A total breaking point. Emotional exhaustion. It demanded some kind of radical shift and escape route.
So that exhaustion, that fatigue, that was the seed for this completely new, almost paradoxical service.
Seems that way. Dexter talks about the group's urgent, desperate need for a break. a different kind of op that could offer some mental distance from the horrors they were facing daily.
A change of pace, I guess.
Yeah. And it was December 2014 when Client Zero, as they called it, just sort of emerged. The story started simply. One group member shared a story about a relative's friend.
Okay.
This friend was in a pretty common situation, right? He wanted to leave his girlfriend, found someone new, but he desperately wanted an out.
The classic easy way out.
Exactly. A way to end it without being the bad guy, without facing the fallout of being the cheater.
Right. Which immediately makes you ask why. Why would a group fighting the darkest online crimes suddenly switch to helping cheaters, it seems,
Yeah.
backwards?
Totally counterintuitive, almost morally contradictory, given what they'd just been through.
Yeah.
Yet Dexter's reason, it's stark, almost desperate pragmatism, they said. Listen, it's either we do this before our mind breaks.
Wow. That's blunt.
Incredibly blunt. They framed this new thing as a light operation, a complete contrast to the heavy, harrowing off-child safety. It was explicitly seen as an escape valve.
A pressure release.
Yeah, to keep some sanity, prevent a total mental collapse. And this gives such a unique, maybe unsettling look at coping mechanisms under extreme stress.
How people justify things.
Right. It shows that sometimes people might take morally questionable paths, not out of malice, but as a kind of flawed self-preservation, a desperate attempt to reset mentally when pushed right to the edge.
Choosing the lesser evil in their minds.
Exactly. The perceived lesser of two evils, purely for their own psychological survival at that moment.
But even then, even in this supposedly lighter thing designed as a break, Dexter admits the cost up front.
Yeah, that confession is chilling.
They state it so bluntly, almost like a prophecy. Looking back, a mind did break while doing this side business. In this case, mine did.
It's heavy. It foreshadows the deeper, more complex damage this new, ethically murky path would eventually take on Dexter's own mind.
Okay, so they have Client Zero. They desperately need this mental escape, and they start building the blueprint for this new deception business, the so-called loyalty test model.
Right, the methodology.
Setting up that first case, the info gathering was surprisingly low-tech, wasn't it?
Yeah, very human-driven.
The client's relative acted as a kind of go-between, a bridge. And the client himself, Dexter says, just vented a lot, poured out enough detail.
All the raw material they needed.
Exactly. No need for fancy tech tricks like OSINT, open source intelligence, or CCN, closed source stuff.
No hacking tools needed at that stage.
Right. No phishing, no Metasploit payloads, none of that. Just the human element. The client talking provided everything.
In that initial setup, it reveals something crucial right away. The transactional nature of it all.
Definitely.
Dexter spells it out. The client paid a price, and the goal was specific. Stay hidden, leave with reputation intact. Payment up front by February 2015.
So a clear contract, almost.
Yeah, a cynical business model built on manipulating emotions. It wasn't about providing a service in the normal sense. It was about facilitating an outcome for cash.
Buying your way out of accountability.
Precisely. Allowing the client to purchase absolution. It shows this cold, calculated approach to really personal, painful situations, turning messy human relationships into a paid operation.
Commodifying the breakup.
Exactly. Solving the problem for a fee, neatly avoiding personal responsibility.
So after thinking it through, they landed on their core strategy, which was basically sophisticated entrapment, right? Designed to shift the blame entirely.
Yeah, the blame game.
The brainstorming led to this plan. First, create a solid alibi for their client, make sure they look innocent. Then simultaneously, systematically build a really convincing fake profile to entice the target.
Lure them in.
Exactly. Cause them to pull the trigger to cheat with the fake profile. The whole cynical goal. Make the target the undeniable cheater.
So the client walks away clean.
Walks away clean. Reputation intact. No blame attached for their own cheating.
And Dexter's acknowledgement here is just blunt. Deception. Yes.
No mincing words.
None. And they point out the modern term. Nowadays, it would be called loyalty test.
Which immediately makes you ask, okay, how fine is that line? Between testing loyalty, which some might argue has some uncomfortable justification, and just outright manipulation.
In this case, it's clearly manipulation, meticulously designed to engineer a specific result and absolve one person of all blame.
Yeah, no question.
And connecting this to the bigger picture, it really speaks to how sophisticated psychological manipulation has become, especially facilitated by digital anonymity and tools.
Using tech to mess with people's heads.
Pretty much. It exploits basic human vulnerabilities, desires, using these carefully built digital worlds to create a controlled scenario where a predetermined, often cruel outcome is almost guaranteed. It's like weaponized gaslighting, really.
Yep.
Monetized.
Okay, but they had a rule, right? A really strict one about who they'd even take on.
A crucial prerequisite, yeah.
Yeah.
Unnegotiable. The client had to be cheating already and wanting an out. No exceptions.
So they weren't actively breaking up happy couples, supposedly.
That was the line they drew. It was about providing this prearranged, reputation-saving exit for someone already cheating who just didn't want to face the music.
Got it. And the methods they used, it's interesting.
Very insightful. Dexter explicitly says it was done without help of AI. This was pre-AI boom, mostly.
Right. Old school, in a way.
Relied on intense due diligence and doing a psychological profile on the target and having material ready to work with to cover every aspect in the book if suspicion arose.
So meticulous planning.
Human-centric.
Deeply human-centric. Calculated. It shows this deep, intuitive grasp of human psychology. And the planning needed to build a believable fake persona that could hold up under scrutiny.
Like building a character.
Exactly. Psychological engineering. A dark art, almost, in predicting and manipulating behavior. Building a whole narrative, a world around the target. Every detail covered.
Yeah.
Fake backstories, pre-planned responses, all to make the deception seamless.
Okay, so what happened with that first case? Client 0. It unfolded exactly as they'd cynically planned. The woman, the target, she fell for the cheating hook, as Dexter put it.
Hook, line, and sinker.
Pretty much. And then adding another layer, they found out she was also cheating with some other dude prior anyway.
Oh, wow. So messy all around.
Very messy. The client, Dexter says, was just glad it was over. But the group's reaction to this, win. It's really telling, gives you chills.
What did they do?
Dexter recounts, all of us in my group looked at all that and laughed. Like, if this is love, then what the fuck is the fuss all about?
Laughed. Wow.
It's cold.
Incredibly cold. That laughter, that cynical comment, it gives this chilling peek into the desensitization setting in.
Yeah, becoming detached.
Complete emotional detachment from the real human pain they were causing or, well, facilitating. It's probably a defense mechanism, right?
Oh,
A buffer against the moral ambiguity.
has to be.
But it raises that critical question about the cumulative effect. Being immersed in a world where relationships seem purely transactional, emotions are just things to manipulate, trust is a weakness.
It changes you. It has to. It erodes empathy, breeds cynicism, warps your whole worldview, makes you question everything about human connection.
So after that first case worked, maybe too well, around mid-March, the group decided, okay, let's scale this up.
Time to expand the operation.
They needed, in Dexter's crude words, more dumb idiots. And they decided Craigslist Personals was the place to find them.
Craigslist Personals, quite the place back then.
Dexter calls it a true no man's land, a digital Wild West, where love, deception, and just shit of all ranges met, before it got shut down in 2018 because of that FOSS DeSesta law.
Right, the anti-sex trafficking legislation.
But for a key period, that was their hunting ground. And choosing Los Angeles County, 10 million people back in 2015, that shows a strategic approach, right?
Okay.
Looking for a big client pool.
Absolutely calculated. It highlights how platforms like Craigslist, even ones just for classifieds, can be twisted for unexpected, often ethically dubious uses.
The internet provides the tools.
And the anonymity, the reach, LA County wasn't random, it was strategic. Tap into a large, diverse, fluid population where the odds of finding people wanting this specific service an easy way out were much higher.
Smart in a dark way.
It shows their opportunistic thinking. They found a digital no man's land where their brand of deception could thrive and scale up quickly.
So how did they actually get clients from Craigslist? The intake process.
Remarkably, it stayed pretty low-key even as they expanded. They posted vague ads. Cryptic, almost.
I'm not spelling it out.
No. Carefully worded with keywords to entice people who wanted to vent out, signaling subtly that they were there to listen without saying what they actually did.
And people a bit.
Apparently, people really let loose. Dexter says they got flooded with submissions, some nonsense, some genuinely tragic, some just no.
Had to filter it somehow.
Right. They quickly set up protocols. If a submission clearly showed someone wanting out of a cheating relationship, they'd follow up. But not the core group.
Who did?
They used a friend of the group, Someone described as more socially skilled, who acted as the go-between, built rapport, while the main group stayed anonymous.
A front person.
Essentially. And this friend got a small cut, plus a job reference from Dexter, formalizing the illicit deal.
Wow. That whole setup,
Yeah.
it raises questions about anonymity and trust, doesn't it?
Big time. Dexter calls their operating principle least privilege. Client knows almost nothing about them. They know only the bare minimum about the client. Maximum separation.
Keep everyone safe, I guess.
Safe and anonymous. They took tips when the contract was done, and Dexter mentions consequences for not paying, which implies some kind of enforcement, however shady.
Yeah, you wonder what those were.
Right. But what's fascinating is the structure. It's almost professional. Applied to this ethically bankrupt service, they built a scalable system for emotional manipulation. Intake filters, liaisons, payment enforcement.
Like a real but underground business.
Exactly. Operating in the shadows, preying on vulnerabilities.
And the money. Where did the money from these tips actually go?
Ah, that's telling. It wasn't just profit. It was allocated, Dexter says, to cover costs for their other operations.
Their darker stuff.
Specifically, funding an Eastern European bulletproof VPS.
Okay, explain Bulletproof VPS.
It's a virtual private server, hosting basically, but designed to be super resistant to legal takedowns, law enforcement, DDoS attacks, used for illicit or really sensitive stuff where you need extreme anonymity and resilience.
So the cheater business funded their more serious hacking.
Directly. It connects the seemingly light deception business straight back to their darker, more serious hacking projects. It shows that even their mental break was strategically used to support the bigger, more dangerous operations.
One illicit activity feeding another.
A whole ecosystem of digital shadow work. Self-sustaining.
Now, Dexter's observations about the clients themselves, they kind of challenge stereotypes, don't they, about who cheats and why?
They do. Dexter asks point blank, "Did you think we only had men as clients?" And states, "Women love sex just as much as guys did. The only difference is they add emotion to the cheating." It's blunt, maybe provocative.
Definitely gets you thinking.
But what's really striking is the common thread Dexter saw in almost all clients, male or female.
Raise that.
They wanted to be intact of their sin because they had more to lose and didn't want to be seen as the bad guy.
Reputation again. Avoiding accountability.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about, well, human nature. That pervasive desire to escape consequences, especially when reputation, social standing, money is on the line.
Dexter's observation about the rift between reputation and pleasure being a thin slope.
And that money can also buy emotional manipulation. It's chillingly accurate, perhaps.
It makes you really question the motivations. It wasn't just ending a relationship.
No, it was often about preserving that public image, avoiding the messy, painful consequences of your own actions, outsourcing the blame.
Paying someone else to do the dirty work emotionally.
Precisely. It highlights how powerful societal pressure, the fear of judgment, can push people to extreme, ethically dubious measures just to keep up appearances.
Which brings us to what Dexter calls, quite chillingly, the internal glitch. And the irony here is just, wow, the Ashley Madison hack, the one that caused such public outrage,
Yeah.
it actually paradoxically helped their secret deception business at first.
How so?
It just generated more buzz, more cheating stories everywhere, online, in the media, which led to more potential clients looking for their kind of service.
Wow. So disaster for Ashley Madison, but a business boost for them.
Kind of, yeah. But despite that boost, Dexter's group stayed super cautious. They made a point of not taking clients who'd specifically used Ashley Madison.
Why not? Seems counterintuitive again.
They respected their own internal what-if threshold, Dexter says. They were fine orchestrating their own deceptions, but they drew the line at the potential chaos from a huge public hack overlapping with their own operations. Didn't want that heat.
Operational security, risk management.
Exactly.
That highlights a really surprising dynamic, doesn't it? Where these huge external events, even catastrophes, could indirectly fuel a shadow service.
Yeah.
But it also forced them to define their own risk rules, draw lines. What's fascinating is that even in the illicit world, there are these internal codes, risk assessments, OPSEC awareness.
They knew anonymity was key for everyone.
Absolutely. The anonymity they promised clients was just as crucial for their own safety. An exposed Ashley Madison user was just too risky for their least privileged model. It's a calculated move, pure self-preservation. Shows a strange kind of professionalism, however twisted.
But even with all that calculation, something started to go wrong internally for Dexter, this internal glitch.
Yeah, the personal cost catching up.
It started about 4 or 5 months into this deception business. That Okena middle they thought they'd found, between the truly vile people of their old ops and just helping dumb idiots, now it just fell apart.
Became unsustainable.
Totally. Dexter describes this profound, really unsettling shift in how they saw people, especially couples. They started obsessively analyze people surrounding me,
Oh, wow. That sounds exhausting.
asking themselves these constant intrusive questions. What were you hiding? Were you actually happy or full of shit? Do they know? Is your darkest secret harming people?
Good grief. The cynicism just took over everything. It's compelling, isn't it? How the constant exposure to deception, plus actively participating in it, just corroded Dexter's ability to see anything genuine.
Lost all trust.
Completely. It raises that critical question about the psychological burden of living in constant suspicion. The erosion of basic trust. It's like psychological projection, right?
Yeah.
The secrets they were dealing with professionally started reflecting back onto their personal life, their own interactions. The internal glitch wasn't just discomfort, it was a fundamental breakdown, a blurring of lines between the job and reality.
A heavy price for a mental break.
An incredibly heavy price.
And these questions, they became overwhelming. Dexter started seeking refuge in my own vices to try and quiet the noise. Sometimes it helped, sometimes not.
A coping mechanism, but a flawed one.
And then flashbacks from the other, darker operations started coming back more often, piling on the mental strain.
Compounding the trauma.
Yeah. And they were in therapy at the time, but Dexter admits it didn't really help with this specific struggle because they weren't fully open with a therapist, said it only helped to study people better.
Wow. That is incredibly poignant. It just underscores how vital vulnerability and honesty are for real healing.
Right, if you're not open.
Even professional help can get twisted. In Dexter's case, therapy inadvertently sharpened their ability to analyze, maybe even manipulate people further.
Oh, man.
That inability to be vulnerable, to really expose the inner turmoil, it became this huge block to healing, ironically trapping them deeper inside the very deception they were creating. It highlights that isolating loneliness that comes with a life full of secrets.
And then it got even more complicated personally, right?
Yeah, another layer of difficulty.
Dexter met someone new, someone they actually felt a real connection with, wanted a relationship with. But it immediately triggered this crippling dilemma. Can I trust this person I wanted to be with? All the experiences, all the deceit they'd seen and done, it left them feeling miserable as shit.
Understandably.
And the worst part, not being able to share this internal war they were fighting inside, feeling like a burden. It just pushed them deeper into isolation.
That connects so powerfully to the bigger picture, how a life like that, steeped in secrets and witnessing deception, can just poison personal relationships, erode the very ability to connect genuinely.
Trust is everything.
It's the foundation.
Yeah.
And it became impossible for Dexter when their whole worldview was so fractured by manipulation. The inability to share, to be vulnerable, was a self-inflicted wound, a direct result of the burden they carried.
Just tragic, really. How the choices, even meant as an escape, ended up costing so much personally. So this internal struggle, this misery, it just kept building until it hit an absolute breaking point.
Yeah.
What Dexter calls the final straw.
The point of no return.
What finally made them quit the business, quit everything, was one case that felt wrong and it was unlid.
Yeah.
Just felt fundamentally wrong.
A moral line finally crossed internally.
Yeah. And this moral crisis in their work life, it tragically happened right as that personal relationship they were trying to build also failed, just compounding the distress, the disillusionment.
A perfect storm of collapse. In that moment, it raises such a critical question, doesn't it? What happens when your operational rules, the strict procedures of your secret group, slam right into your own reawakened personal ethics?
The code versus conscience.
Exactly. Dexter describes how this one troubling case forced them to break the rule of going beyond the curtain and leak what we had to the unsuspecting target.
Whoa, that's a huge step, violating their own core principle.
Hugely dangerous for them and the group, a direct violation. And what made this case so disturbing, what likely pushed Dexter over the edge? The client.
What about the client?
They had a domestic violence charge, a DV charge, which strongly suggested they weren't just using Dexter's service to escape cheating, but maybe to slide into another potentially toxic, abusive relationship without any accountability.
Oh, that's dark. Really dark.
So breaking that rule, it signals this profound internal shift. A moral boundary Dexter just couldn't let cross anymore. They had to sabotage the case, even if it risked everything.
A conscious choice, driven by some desperate sense of justice, maybe.
It feels like it. A high-stakes gamble.
So what happened? What were the consequences of breaking that rule, leaking the info?
Immediate. And for Dexter, unexpectedly harsh. The target, the woman they leaked to, she wasn't grateful.
No.
No. Dexter says she was mad and blamed us for the problems in her relationship with the client to the point she wanted to unmask us.
Oh my God. So it backfired completely,
Right, yeah.
threatening to expose them.
Totally backfired. This external threat of exposure was devastating. And at the same time, the whole group was already under crushing stress from all their operations. Dexter says they genuinely felt they were all losing our damn minds.
The pressure was immense.
The threat of being unmasked, of orders for our arrest, felt incredibly real. So Dexter made the call. As hard as it was, they retired. Completely. From hacking, everything. June 2016.
Just walked away.
Walked away. Marked the end with that quote from The Doors. "This is the end, my only friend. The end." Poignant, huh?
Very.
And connecting that ending to the bigger picture, it just powerfully shows the unpredictable fallout of intervention, even when it feels morally right.
Good intentions, bad results.
Sometimes. Dexter's attempt to fix a wrong blew up, creating an external threat that mirrored their own internal breakdown. The fear, the stress, it just pushed them over the limit.
That final act, breaking the rule, was the catalyst.
The definitive catalyst for a permanent break. It just shows that even in a world built on calculated deception, there are always unpredictable human factors, unforeseen consequences that can unravel everything. The operations, the psychology.
A forced retirement, really.
Driven by the sheer, unbearable weight of it all. The psychological toll finally won.
So, in the afterword, Dexter shares some really raw, unflinching thoughts. Reflections on trust, love, and just. Living with a past like that, so secret, so profound.
Yeah, the aftermath.
They admit it feels weird talking about it, preferred for ages to just keep it lock and die with it.
Understandable given the nature of it all.
Legal reasons still stop them from talking about the other, maybe darker stuff. But this specific topic, the peculiar subject of the deception business, they felt they had to write about it because the immense, unbearable toll it took.
That's really telling, isn't it? The psychological weight. It highlights that huge burden of hidden experiences, that complex, torturous dance between privacy, confession, and maybe finding some kind of healing.
The reluctance speaks volumes.
It really does. That impulse to guard secrets, even when they're eating you up inside. And the fact that this subject, the deception business, was the one they felt compelled to unpack.
Above everything else.
Yeah. It suggests that while other ops might have had bigger legal risks, maybe physical dangers, this one carried a unique emotional, existential weight, something that demanded an outlet, eventually.
Like a confession, but not for legal reasons.
Exactly. More for personal processing, understanding.
And Dexter's core message boiled down from all those years in the shadows. It's stark. They came into it with one mind, one view of the world.
And left completely changed.
Left with a completely different take on love, relationships, and just dealing with people.
And that conveys the profound, irreversible impact, doesn't it, on their fundamental self, their perception of everything. Dexter talks about being left utterly conflicted, understanding people even less than before.
Wow. Less.
Yeah, and grappling with this pervasive cold rage that therapy didn't help much in understanding.
Not just disillusionment, then. Something deeper.
Much deeper. A corrosive transformation. A fractured worldview. The constant exposure to deception orchestrating it. It made them question the very fabric of connection, authenticity, trust.
A chilling reminder that some experiences just change you fundamentally, leave a permanent mark.
An indelible mark, yeah.
And Dexter doesn't shy away from potential critics. People who might just label them criminal and evil.
How do they address that?
With a defiant question almost. Who were my victims? Exactly. They argue that in none of their cases, except for those who were victims of crime, were people entirely innocent.
The moral relativism argument. That the targets weren't blameless either.
Pretty much. Suggesting they were already involved in their own deceptions, infidelity, manipulation before the grip stepped in.
That raises that really uncomfortable question about moral relativism, doesn't it? And personal accountability in a world full of secrets.
Shifting the blame, maybe?
Or maybe reflecting a genuinely cynical belief, born from experience, that people are just complex. Not good or evil, but shades of gray. That ethical dilemmas rarely have clean heroes and villains.
It's a challenging perspective. doesn't
But
excuse the actions, but tries to frame them in universal human imperfection, seeing secrets everywhere.
deep, unsettling first-hand experience talking there.
And even though they're retired now, Dexter admits they're still lying in the bed I made years ago, dealing with memories and thoughts of my actions.
The past isn't really past.
Apparently not. They even talk about reliving that last problematic case through someone close to them now. And it still leaves them conflicted because they know ultimately only they can take action.
Wow. That illustrates the enduring footprint of past actions, doesn't it? Even when you try to move on.
A burden of knowing.
Exactly. And the limits of intervening, being haunted by it, especially that last case where they broke the rule, and now seeing someone else in a similar spot but feeling powerless.
That realization that only they can take action. A big shift from being the orchestrator.
A huge, painful shift. It shows this ongoing internal struggle, still processing those harsh lessons about human nature, lingering conflict, powerlessness.
So after all that, what's the ultimate point? Why write this? Dexter says it explicitly. Understanding, not redemption.
Not seeking forgiveness, but clarity.
Maybe, most profoundly, to enlighten people to maybe take things slow in relationships.
That final piece of advice, it's really compelling, isn't it? Distilled from years of seeing the worst. Because at the end of day, you truly don't know anybody in this world.
Heavy.
Especially now, Dexter adds, in an age of advancing digital tools and advanced AI making finding love tricky.
So much easier to fake things online.
Exactly. So Dexter's final counsel is simple, timeless almost. The only thing you can do is be patient. Time does the rest.
A call for caution, discernment, letting things unfold naturally.
Instead of forcing it, manipulating it, rushing it. Crucial advice in a world offering endless ways to disguise, to create fake personas. It's hard-won wisdom, paid for with a fractured mind, a cynical heart. But it speaks to that universal truth about how little we can ever truly know another person. Hashtag outro me.
Well, we've just completed an extraordinary deep dive, haven't we? Into this really compelling, deeply unsettling account of hacking, calculated deception, and the profound, often hidden personal cost.
It's quite a journey.
From the echoes of Ashley Madison right through to the intricate, almost clinical workings of that loyalty test service. Dexter's story just pulls back the curtain, reveals those hidden, often cynical corners of human motivation.
And the power of digital tools both to expose secrets and to create them meticulously.
It's a sobering look, really, at how tangled up our digital lives are now with our raw, emotional realities.
And connecting this whole story to the broader landscape, it really challenges us, doesn't it, to rethink the boundaries of ethics in this digital age. They seem so fluid, so blurry sometimes.
They really do.
And it's such a stark reminder of the psychological toll, often unseen, on people who navigate these murky, morally gray waters. Dexter's journey shows that even seemingly lighter deceptions can have devastating, lasting effects on the person doing them.
Eroding trust, reshaping your whole worldview.
Absolutely. It forces us to confront those uncomfortable shades of gray in human behavior, especially when digital anonymity and advanced tools offer these unprecedented ways to manipulate and dodge accountability.
Dexter's journey.
Huh?
So much weariness, moral ambiguity, that complete personal transformation. It ends with that powerful, almost sad reminder you truly don't know anybody in this world.
And that ultimately only they can take action.
Yeah.
So as you, our listener, reflect on this deep dive, what stands out most profoundly to you from Dexter's story? How does their journey and those final hard-won words about patience, about the elusiveness of trust, how does that resonate in our increasingly complex, digitally tangled lives?
It definitely leaves you thinking.
It raises that crucial, enduring question for all of us. In a world where deception can be engineered with such chilling precision, where people will literally pay to escape accountability, how do we actually cultivate and protect genuine trust, both online and off?
And how do we really get to know the people we let into our lives?
Exactly. It's a question that, much like Dexter's own turbulent journey, offers no easy answers. But it demands our careful thought, our ongoing reflection.